The betrayal came in the stark glare of 100 camera flashes, his arm around her waist on the red carpet. My name, once synonymous with precision and success, dissolved into tabloid fodder overnight. My office keys, heavy in my palm, suddenly felt worthless. "You're still young, Clara," Arthur had murmured later, his eyes empty. "You need a reliable man." My life, carefully constructed brick by brick, had collapsed, leaving me sifting through the dust and splinters. I sat at my kitchen table, the yellow legal pad before me, a cheap ballpoint pen in my hand. This was where it began, or perhaps, where it truly ended. I used to be good at this, at reading people. My reputation as an agent, a self-made woman in a cutthroat industry, rested on my ability to spot a lie in a smile, to see the angle before it was played. The irony was a bitter taste. I had missed all the crucial tells in my own life, in my own marriage. Every sharp instinct, every carefully honed radar, had failed me completely. I looked at the blank page, then out the window at the gray New York sky. 6 years before, the world had seemed a different place. I remembered the exact morning I met Arthur Hayes. It was late March, chilly for New York, and the conference room at Sterling and Finch felt colder. I was there for Todd Jensen, a client who thought himself too big for his britches and needed me to rein him in during the new contract negotiations. I was new money, a self-made woman from Ohio, clawing my way up from the mailroom of a Chicago agency. Arthur, on the other hand, was old money, Harvard Law, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was representing the studio, sitting across the polished mahogany table with an easy, almost imperceptible grace. His presence filled the room quietly. Arthur did not need to raise his voice or posture. His eyes, a calm shade of gray, held a keen intelligence. He spoke with a measured cadence, each word carefully chosen, not to impress, but to clarify. I watched him, listening to the legal jargon, admiring the precision of his arguments. It was a professional admiration at first, then something else. A quiet hum that settled in my chest. He was unlike anyone I had ever encountered in my world of big talkers and empty promises. The negotiation for Todd Jensen stretched into the afternoon, then concluded with a compromise that left everyone feeling slightly victorious. As we packed up our briefs, Arthur simply suggested, "There is a good coffee shop on Bleecker. Perhaps we could continue our discussion, if you have the time." His question was polite, unforced. I found myself agreeing without hesitation. The West Village coffee shop was warm, smelling of dark roast and something sweet. The initial work discussion, a brief recap of contract clauses, quickly faded. Arthur asked about my journey, not just my career, but me. He didn't just listen, he absorbed, his gaze steady and genuinely curious. It was a rare commodity in my world, where conversations were always transactional. He spoke of growing up in Singapore, the pressures of his family's expectations for him to follow the law, the weight of their legacy. Then, almost shyly, he confessed his secret dream of one day owning a small, independent bookstore, a place filled with forgotten novels and quiet corners. I found myself opening up, sharing details I rarely revealed. My mother working double shifts at the diner to keep us afloat. The way I learned to stretch $1 and a dream. The slow, steady climb from fetching coffee for senior agents to closing million-dollar deals. I even told him about my vintage movie poster collection. A small rebellion of art and nostalgia hidden away in my apartment. It felt easy, effortless, a natural unfolding. By the time we walked out into the cool evening air, hours had passed. I looked at him, tall and composed, and something shifted inside me. This wasn't just chemistry. This was the beginning of something that could either make me or break me. I felt it with a certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Our courtship became a whirlwind, swift and consuming. Arthur would send a coffee to my office in the mornings, sometimes with a small, handwritten note tucked beneath the lid. I would send him terrible lawyer jokes by text, knowing he would appreciate the dry humor. We became that couple, the kind people talked about at industry events, the ones who made it all look so easy, so perfectly balanced. There was a shine to everything we did, An unspoken understanding. He proposed at the same small coffee shop where we had first truly connected. He pulled out a small velvet box. The diamond inside, custom-made, flawless, a perfect cut. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I cannot imagine a future without you." It was everything I had ever thought I wanted, all wrapped up in a moment of pure, unadulterated romance. Our wedding was everything a magazine spread would desire. Traditional families, Hampton's glamour, a seamless blend of old money and new ambition. It was perfect. We were perfect. Or so I believed. The Upper East Side penthouse, with its sweeping city views and meticulously chosen art, felt like a promise fulfilled. For the first 2 years, it was a home, not just an address. Arthur and I, freshly married, moved through it with a shared lightness, a silent understanding. We explored Paris with the eagerness of students, Tokyo with a sense of wonder, Cape Town with an eye for adventure. Our careers, a tandem climb, mirrored our personal lives. We celebrated every client win, every closed deal, with a bottle of good champagne, clinking glasses against the backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. Every loss, every setback, was met with a quiet, solid reassurance. We were, I truly believed, that rare thing in New York, a power couple that actually loved each other. Not just the idea of it, but success, sharp and demanding, began to twist things. It wasn't a sudden break, more like a slow, almost imperceptible turn of a screw. Arthur's legal cases grew heavier, more complex, drawing him into a vortex of corporate litigation that consumed his days and nights. He was always in court, or preparing for it, or traveling for depositions. First, it was just the occasional missed dinner, a quick text arriving late in the afternoon. "Sorry. Another late one. Just grab something." Then, entire weekends would vanish, swallowed by urgent filings or out-of-state meetings. Eventually, whole weeks would pass where I saw him only in fleeting moments, a sleepy good morning before he left, a brief good night after I was already asleep. I, too, buried myself in work. The agency was thriving, and I was chasing bigger fish, flashier clients. There was a thrill in the chase, a satisfaction in sealing a 7-figure deal that quieted the growing emptiness in the penthouse. The demands of my career, once a shared ambition, became a sanctuary, a place to pour my energy when the other parts of my life started to feel thin. I started working later, arriving home to the quiet apartment not with a sense of anticipation, but with the dull thud of exhaustion. The small, intimate rituals that had once bound us together simply stopped. There were no more shared breakfasts, just the clatter of my own spoon in my cereal bowl, the silent news channel flickering, the small, handwritten notes Arthur used to leave on my desk, little jokes or words of encouragement, were gone. Our long, connecting conversations, the bedrock of our early days, faded into distant memory. Now, our discussions were logistical. "Did you confirm the dry cleaning?" Or, "The car needs an oil change." We talked at each other, not with each other. Sex became a line item on a mental calendar, something that happened because it was expected, a task to be completed. The easy, unthinking hunger we once shared was replaced by a quiet obligation, a perfunctory act performed in the dim light of the bedroom. Afterwards, we would turn our backs, finding sleep in separate silences. Date nights, once evenings of whispered secrets and shared laughter, devolved into working dinners at dimly lit, expensive restaurants. We would sit across from each other, both of us checking our phones under the table, discussing industry trends or upcoming client presentations more than our own lives. There was always a colleague to impress, a potential investor to schmooze. Our annual summer party, an event meant to celebrate our life together, our success, our journey, became just another networking obligation. A parade of air kisses and superficial smiles. We were hosts, performing a carefully choreographed dance, separate but together. I should have seen it coming, of course. The signs were there, as subtle as a shift in the wind, but clear if I had only bothered to look up from my own grind. But my relentless pursuit of success, my own ambition, had blinded me. It had become a thick, self-imposed fog, obscuring the slow, quiet unraveling of the very life I thought I was building. The marital crisis had been a low, persistent thrum beneath the surface of our lives, but it struck its loudest note with the return of Todd Jensen, our old client, and his new scandal. Todd, never one for discretion, had been caught in a particularly messy situation with a co-star's wife. Compromising photos were circulating, whispered threats of legal action were mounting, and his career, already on thin ice, was teetering on the edge of disaster. My first thought, almost instinctively, was Arthur. He was brilliant with damage control, a master of navigating the treacherous waters of celebrity legal messes. I pictured us working side by side again, the way we used to, two sharp minds tackling a problem, reigniting not just our professional spark, but perhaps something personal too. A shared battle might be just what we needed. I found him in his walk-in closet, meticulously folding a silk tie into his overnight bag. He was preparing for another late night at the office, a detail he had mentioned briefly in a text hours ago. "Arthur," I began, my voice attempting a casual tone. "Todd Jensen is in another bind. This one's bad. He needs you." He paused, but didn't look up, his hands still on the tie. "Todd Jensen?" His tone was flat, almost as if he were trying to place the name. "No, Clara, I can't. I'm completely swamped. This is serious," I insisted, moving closer to the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Photos. A co-star's wife. It could ruin him." Arthur finally looked up, his eyes a little bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I'm in the middle of the Sterling Evergreen merger," he said, his voice laced with the weariness that had become his constant companion. "It's a multi-billion-dollar deal. I can't even blink." He went back to his packing. "Can't one of your associates take it?" I asked, my voice tightening. I watched his precise movements, the careful way he placed each item. It was like watching a stranger. "No," he said, not even looking at me this time. "This merger is everything right now. The firm's entire year depends on it. Billions of dollars." He zipped the bag shut with a definitive snap. "And my client's career isn't important?" The words came out sharper than I intended, laced with a familiar feeling of dismissal, of being undervalued. It was not just about Todd, it was about me, about us. He finally turned to face me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a shadow of regret in his eyes. A flicker of the man I married. "Clara, I just can't right now," he said, his voice softening just enough to sting. "You know how these things go. When can you?" I pressed, stepping further into the closet, the smell of his expensive suit suddenly overwhelming. "When was the last time you could do anything besides work? When was the last time you wanted to?" He let out a deep, exhausted sigh, a sound that had grown to fill me with a quiet, simmering resentment. It was the sound of a man perpetually burdened, perpetually put upon. "Let's not do this now, Clara," he pleaded, running a hand through his hair. "I have an urgent meeting at 6 a.m. He glanced at his watch. "Which means I need to be in the car in 10 minutes. I watched him straighten his tie, a habit that once seemed charming in its precision, now only irritated me. Every movement was efficient, practiced, detached. He was already gone, mentally, to his next obligation. "Will you at least be home for the party next week?" I asked, a thin thread of desperation in my voice. Our annual summer party, a bastion of our supposedly perfect life, felt like the only thing tethering us to normalcy. He paused, a tiny hesitation, his eyes unfocused as if consulting a mental calendar. "Yes," he said, finally. "Of course. It's our thing, isn't it?" The words were perfunctory, spoken with a detached, almost obligatory tone. Our thing. The phrase, once a sweet affirmation, now felt hollow, an echo in the empty space between us. Something inside me snapped then, a quiet click. I looked at Arthur, at his meticulous tie and his exhausted eyes, and a cold resolve settled over me. I would make him notice. I would make him remember. The quiet click inside me, after Arthur's perfunctory promise to attend our party, solidified into a hard knot of resolve. I felt utterly unseen, a ghost in my own life. It was no longer enough to just endure the quiet erosion of our marriage. I needed Arthur to see me again, to remember what he had, to feel something, anything. Even if that something was anger or jealousy. My desperation had found a new, sharper edge into this widening void in our marriage, almost as if cued by some unseen force. Arthur's best friend, Sam Peterson, unwittingly stepped. Sam had been Arthur's rock since their first day at Harvard Law. He had stood as best man at our wedding, his easy smile a fixture in our most cherished photographs. He was practically family, his presence woven into the fabric of our lives. Countless holidays spent at our place, summer vacations in the Hamptons, ski trips to Vermont. Sam was simply there, a constant, comforting presence. But Sam was also everything Arthur wasn't. Where Arthur was precise, Sam was relaxed, almost fluid. Arthur calculated every move, weighed every word. Sam was spontaneous, prone to sudden bursts of laughter, quick with a joke or an impromptu plan. Arthur lived in the future, constantly planning, preparing. Sam simply improvised, living firmly in the present moment, always ready for whatever came next. He rarely wore a tie unless absolutely forced, and his blazers always seemed a little rumpled, in a charming way. He drove a battered old Range Rover, while Arthur drove a sleek, new Mercedes. Looking back, I knew I should have recognized the danger in that contrast. The differences between them were not just superficial. They were fundamental. But at that moment, I was utterly fixated, my mind a tunnel vision focused solely on provoking a reaction from Arthur. The potential fallout, the irreversible damage I might cause, was a distant, unimportant murmur, easily drowned out by the roar of my own frustration. I needed him to look at me again, truly look, and the idea of using Sam to shake Arthur from his emotional complacency began to take root in my mind, a dark seed sprouting in fertile, desperate ground. I pushed away any thought of repercussions. The quiet voice of caution that usually guided me was silenced by the deafening clang of my longing for Arthur's attention. My craving had become reckless, an all-consuming drive that overshadowed everything else. I was no longer thinking clearly, no longer weighing the consequences. I was just reacting, desperate for any spark, even if it meant setting fire to everything we had built. Sam, completely unaware of the chasm that had opened in my marriage, remained his usual, easygoing self. He'd call Arthur about a golf game, or text me about a new restaurant. He'd offer to help carry groceries, or fix a leaky faucet. Always with that familiar, uncomplicated warmth. He was simply Sam, the loyal friend, the easy confidant, the man who brought a lightness into every room he entered. But as the days ticked closer to our annual summer party, I started to see Sam not just as a loyal friend, but as a potential catalyst. He was the one person who could truly get under Arthur's skin. The one person whose presence might force Arthur to finally, fully, acknowledge me. Sam, in his innocent good nature, was becoming a tool, a means to an end. An awakening was long overdue for Arthur, and I was prepared to use whatever, or whoever, it took to achieve it. The night of our annual summer party began as it always did, following a predictable, almost sterile routine. The penthouse, usually a quiet echo chamber for my own thoughts, was a hive of controlled activity. Caterers, in crisp black uniforms, bustled through the open kitchen, their movements precise as they arranged platters of artfully sculpted hors d'oeuvres across the polished surfaces. Bartenders, with the quiet intensity of chemists, meticulously lined up premium liquor bottles and sparkling glasses at two separate stations. Florists, their hands stained green, made last-minute adjustments to massive, fragrant arrangements that transformed our living room into a luxury greenhouse. Every detail was curated, every element in its assigned place. I spent hours getting ready, a ritual that usually brought a sense of anticipation, but tonight felt like a carefully planned military operation. I chose a red Valentino dress, a striking, almost defiant shade, cut to cling in all the right places. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. I knew it would turn heads, demand attention, and that was precisely its purpose. Especially Arthur's. I wanted to be undeniable, impossible to overlook. Arthur, true to form, arrived home late, his face etched with the familiar lines of exhaustion. He barely had time to squeeze in a quick shower and change into his impeccably tailored tuxedo before the first guests began to arrive. He found me in the living room, overseeing the final touches. He leaned in, giving me a quick, distracted peck on the cheek, his lips brushing my temple. "You look beautiful, Clara," he murmured, his eyes already scanning the room, already mentally preparing for the evening's duties. It was a perfunctory compliment, tossed out like an obligation. Within moments, he was swept away, drawn into a conversation with a senior partner from Sterling and Finch, their heads close together, voices low, already discussing the merger. Business, as always, took precedence. The guest list was our usual blend of New York's entertainment and legal elite. Network executives, their smiles practiced and precise, mingled with powerful studio heads and influential law firm partners. Rising stars from my agency, their eyes bright with ambition, worked the room, making connections. Champagne flowed freely, endlessly refilled by the attentive waitstaff. The conversation hummed at that perfect, sophisticated pitch, a symphony of measured laughter and strategic networking. Through it all, the platitudes flowed like the champagne. "You two are such a wonderful couple," a well-known director gushed, clasping my arm. "So lucky to have each other," a studio executive added, nodding sagely. These words, meant to be flattering, only amplified the quiet ache inside me. They underscored the perfect facade of our life, a seamless projection that bore little resemblance to the quiet erosion happening beneath the surface. Each compliment felt like a judgment, a reminder of the chasm between appearance and reality. I stood amidst the throng, a silent, lonely observer of my own fracturing world. I watched Arthur, across the room, his face animated as he discussed something with a prominent financier, his hand occasionally reaching to adjust his tie. He looked every inch the successful, connected man, the perfect host. He looked complete. And I, in my striking red dress, felt utterly invisible. If they only knew, I thought, the thought a cold stone in my gut. How lonely you could be in a room full of people. If they only knew. This is the halfway point of our journey into Clara's unraveling. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. I remained lost in my thoughts, my eyes tracking Arthur from across the crowded room. He was a natural, charismatic, and engaging, effortlessly networking, entirely oblivious to the silent turmoil churning within me. The red dress, meant to recapture his gaze, was instead drawing the lingering attention of everyone else. My initial plan to simply provoke a reaction from Arthur had begun to take on a dangerous, unpredictable life of its own. Sam Peterson, always affable and easygoing, approached me with a genuine smile. "Can I get you another drink, Clara?" he asked, his voice warm and steady. He complimented my dress, his gaze noticeably lingering longer than Arthur's had earlier. A silent, perilous understanding seemed to pass between us, fueled by my desperation and Sam's innate charm. I felt a distinct pull, a flicker of genuine attention I hadn't received from Arthur in months. The fragile line between trying to make Arthur jealous and genuinely seeking connection with Sam began to blur rapidly. Was I still fighting to save my marriage, or had I already crossed the point of no return? The opulent party, once a symbol of our shared success, had now become the unwitting stage for my impending marital collapse. With a silent, defiant resolve against Arthur's emotional neglect, I reached out and gently took Sam's offered hand. It was the beginning of destroying my marriage, my reputation, and my life. I took Sam's hand, the warmth of his fingers a stark contrast to the cold calculation in my own mind. In that moment, the hum of the party, the polite laughter, and Arthur's distant, oblivious face all faded. It was not a gesture of love, but of defiance. A quiet act of war against the man who had stopped seeing me. I felt the immediate, irreversible shift, the crossing of a line I knew I could not uncross. This was the moment I chose to light the match, knowing full well the fire would consume everything. My marriage, my carefully built reputation, the very life I had so meticulously crafted, all of it poised to crumble. I had walked into that evening desperate to make Arthur notice, to feel something, and by taking Sam's hand, I had ensured he would feel it, and so would I, in ways neither of us could yet comprehend. The silence of the pen on paper now, years later, was just the echo of that decision.